If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales that remind us of the beauty in humanity. The cameras were supposed to make her feel safe. Instead, they shattered everything Eliza Blackwood thought she knew. Eliza stared at the monitor, her manicured fingers trembling as she rewound the footage for the third time. There he was again, Marcus Reyes, the new caretaker she'd hired just 3 weeks ago, the single father she'd nearly dismissed during the interview because of his worn shoes and the small coffee stain on his otherwise crisp white shirt. On the screen, Marcus sat beside her son's wheelchair, not performing his assigned duties, but reading aloud from a dog-eared copy of The Little Prince. 17-year-old Aiden, paralyzed from the neck down after the car accident that had claimed his father's life 2 years ago, was smiling, actually smiling, as Marcus acted out different characters with animated gestures. Eliza hadn't seen her son smile like that since before the accident. She closed the laptop and gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse. The Mumbai skyline glittered beneath her, a testament to the empire she'd built from nothing. Blackwood Technologies had made her one of the wealthiest women in India, but all that money couldn't heal her son's broken body or spirit. The guilt of working through his childhood, of being on a business call when the accident happened, had become her constant companion. The hidden cameras had been installed after the last caretaker had stolen some of Aiden's medication. Trust didn't come easily to Eliza anymore, not when it came to her son's safety. But what she discovered through those lenses wasn't theft or neglect. It was something far more threatening to the walls she'd built around their lives. It was genuine care. Marcus Reyes wiped his brow as he cycled home through the humid evening air. His legs ached from standing all day, but the thought of his daughter waiting at home pushed him forward. At 34, he'd never imagined he'd be a widowed father working 3 jobs to make ends meet, but life had a way of rewriting plans. His main position as Aiden Blackwood's caretaker paid better than anything he'd had before, but the cold efficiency of the Blackwood household made each day challenging. The boy was brilliant but withdrawn, trapped not just by his paralysis but by the fortress of luxury his mother had built around him. "Papa." 8-year-old Leela ran to the door as he entered their small apartment, her dark braids bouncing. "Did you bring it?" Marcus smiled tiredly, pulling a worn library book from his backpack. "As promised, Princess. Beauty and the Beast, your favorite. Will you read it tonight? With the voices?" Her eyes, so like her mother's, pleaded up at him. "Always with the voices," he promised, scooping her up despite his exhaustion. "But dinner first. Did Mrs. Sharma check on you after school?" Leela nodded, chattering about her day as Marcus prepared a simple meal in their tiny kitchen. He listened attentively, pushing away thoughts of the mounting bills and the school fees coming due. Tomorrow would bring its own worries. Tonight was for his daughter. Later, as Leela drifted to sleep with tales of enchanted castles and transformative love filling her dreams, Marcus allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. The photograph of Priya, his late wife, watched from the bedside table as silent tears tracked down his face. "I'm trying, my love," he whispered. "I'm trying so hard." The next morning, Eliza found herself lingering in the doorway of Aiden's room, watching as Marcus helped him with his physical therapy exercises. There was a gentleness to the man's movements, a respect in the way he spoke to her son, not with pity, but with the same straightforward tone he might use with any teenager. "Mrs. Blackwood," Marcus acknowledged her with a nod, not pausing in counting Aiden's passive stretches. "Mom, Marcus is teaching me Hindi," Aiden said, more animated than she'd seen him in months. "Did you know he was a literature professor back in Delhi before?" Aiden trailed off, suddenly aware he might be sharing something personal. "Before life took a different turn," Marcus finished smoothly. 20 more seconds on this stretch, Aiden." Eliza stepped fully into the room. "A professor? Your resume didn't mention that." Something flashed in Marcus's eyes, pride, perhaps, or pain. "It didn't seem relevant to caregiving duties, ma'am." "And yet you read to my son." Reading was on the approved activities list, he replied carefully. It was my idea, Mom, Aiden interjected. I was bored with the audiobooks. Eliza nodded slowly. I'd like to speak with you in my office when you're finished here, Mr. Reyes. As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of fear crossing Marcus's face. It was the look of a man who couldn't afford to lose this job. In her sleek office, Eliza reviewed Marcus's file again. His references were impeccable, his background check clean. A widower with a young daughter, former academic, immigrated to Mumbai 3 years ago. Nothing that explained why she felt so unsettled by his presence. When he entered, standing straight despite his obvious apprehension, she gestured to the chair across from her desk. You've been spending extra time with Aiden, she stated. Beyond your scheduled hours. Marcus didn't deny it. Yes, ma'am. He's been having trouble sleeping. Sometimes we talk, or I read to him. I always complete all medical and physical care duties first. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why do I stay longer? He looked genuinely confused. Because he needs it. Aiden is lonely. The simple truth of it struck her like a physical blow. I don't charge for the extra time, Marcus added quickly. I understand it's not in my contract. That's not, Eliza stopped, recalibrating. Tell me about your daughter. The change of subject caught him off guard. Leela? She's 8. Smart, too smart sometimes. Loves stories and dancing. She wants to be a doctor. And her mother? Pain flickered across his face. Priya died of cancer 3 years ago. That's why we moved here, for a fresh start. You were a professor. Of comparative literature, yes. At Delhi University. A hint of pride crept into his voice. I specialized in the intersection of Eastern and Western literary traditions. And now you're changing adult diapers and monitoring medication schedules. His jaw tightened. Now I'm caring for a young man who deserves dignity and connection, while supporting my daughter. There's no shame in honest work, Mrs. Blackwood. Eliza leaned back, studying him. No, there isn't. Which is why I'm increasing your salary by 30%, effective immediately. Marcus blinked. I don't understand. I'm also adding tutoring to your official duties. Aiden's education has suffered since the accident. His online courses aren't engaging him. Perhaps your background could be of use. That's very generous, but... And I'd like to meet your daughter, Eliza continued, surprising even herself. Aiden could benefit from some company his own age. Marcus stared at her, clearly trying to process this unexpected turn. Mrs. Blackwood, with all due respect, what's really happening here? Eliza stood, walking to the window. The truth hovered on her lips, that she'd been spying on him, that she'd seen his kindness when he thought no one was watching, that it terrified her how much her son needed someone other than her. Instead, she said, I've been neglecting what Aiden needs most. I've been so focused on his physical care that I've ignored his spirit. You haven't. I'm simply acknowledging that. The changes came gradually over the following weeks. Leela's first visit was awkward, a small, vibrant girl suddenly confronted with the sterile luxury of the Blackwood penthouse and a teenage boy who couldn't move from his specialized wheelchair. But children adapt quickly. By the third visit, Leela was perched on the arm of Aiden's chair, teaching him a clapping game she'd learned at school, modifying it so he could participate with his limited mobility. When she asked about his accident with straightforward curiosity, Eliza had tensed, ready to intervene, but Aiden had answered with equal directness. There was something healing in a child's unfiltered acceptance. Marcus began bringing literature from around the world into Aiden's lessons, Russian novels, Japanese poetry, ancient Indian epics. The boy who had been withdrawing from life began engaging with the wider world through stories. Eliza found herself lingering during these sessions, initially to supervise, then increasingly because she too was drawn into the discussions. One evening, after Leela had fallen asleep on the couch during a movie night that had somehow become a weekly tradition, Eliza found herself alone with Marcus on the balcony. "She looks like her mother," Eliza observed, glancing back at the sleeping child. Marcus smiled softly. "Acts like her too, stubborn, compassionate, sees right through pretense. You must miss her terribly." "Every day," he acknowledged. "But Leela keeps her alive somehow. The way she laughs, the questions she asks." He paused. "I'm sorry about your husband. Aiden mentioned it was recent." 2 years, Eliza said. "The same accident. Rajiv was driving. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the median. Rajiv died instantly. Aiden's spine was crushed." The clinical details were easier to share than the emotional aftermath. "You blame yourself," Marcus said quietly. "It wasn't a question." Eliza stiffened. "I was supposed to be with them. I had a meeting I couldn't miss. And if you had been there? Maybe I would have been driving instead. Maybe I would have reacted faster. Maybe you would be dead too, and Aiden would be completely alone," Marcus finished gently. The truth of it hung in the air between them. Eliza turned away, blinking back unexpected tears. "I don't know how to help him," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I can buy the best care, the best equipment, but I don't know how to make him want to live again." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "When Priya died, I was lost. Academic achievements, career ambitions, none of it mattered anymore. What saved me was Leela needing me to be present, not just providing. Aiden doesn't need me. He has nurses, doctors, therapists, and now you. He needs his mother," Marcus said simply. "Not the CEO, not the provider, just his mother, with all her imperfections and humanity." Eliza looked at him then, really looked at him, this man who had lost everything and rebuilt a life centered entirely on love rather than achievement. Something shifted in her understanding of strength. The cameras remained, but Eliza stopped checking them obsessively. Instead, she began leaving work earlier, being physically present in her home. She started joining Aiden for meals, awkwardly at first, then with growing comfort as they rediscovered each other. One afternoon, she cancelled a board meeting to attend Aiden's physical therapy session. The therapist had been suggesting a new experimental treatment, one that might restore some function to Aiden's hands, but her son had been resistant. "I don't see the point," he told her when she asked why. "So I can press buttons on a remote control by myself? Move a joystick? My life is still just waiting." "Waiting for what?" she asked. "To die, I guess." He said it matter-of-factly, without drama. "Everything interesting about life requires movement, participation." The words cut through her like glass. This was what she had failed to see, that the medical care she'd so carefully orchestrated was merely prolonging an existence her son didn't value. That night, after Aiden was asleep, she made a decision. She called her executive team and informed them she would be taking a 6-month sabbatical, effective immediately. Then she called Marcus. "I need your help," she said when he answered, concern evident in his voice at the late hour. "I want to take Aiden on a journey." The logistics were complicated. A paralyzed teenager couldn't simply be taken on vacation. Medical equipment had to be arranged, accommodations carefully selected, contingency plans established. But Eliza approached it with the same determination that had built her company. 2 weeks later, a private plane carried them to Kerala, Eliza, Aiden, Marcus, and Leela, along with a medical team. They settled into a specially adapted house overlooking the Arabian Sea, where the air was heavy with spice and possibility. "What exactly is your plan here, Mom?" Aiden asked on their 3rd day, as his wheelchair was being positioned on the veranda. Eliza looked out at the ocean. "I don't have one, for once. I just know we needed to be somewhere different. Somewhere that isn't defined by what happened to us. Aiden studied her face. You're different lately. Am I? Less armored. He gestured with his eyes toward Marcus and Leela, who were examining a colorful bird in a nearby tree. Is it because of them? Eliza considered this. Partly. Marcus reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that there are different kinds of strength. He told me about his wife, Aiden said quietly. About how she died. He said grief is like the ocean, it never really goes away, but you can learn to swim in it instead of drowning. Eliza felt her throat tighten. He's a wise man. He also said you're one of the strongest people he's ever met. Aiden's eyes, so like his father's, held hers. He said we're alike, you and I, too stubborn to accept help, too afraid to need people. And what do you think? A small smile touched Aiden's lips. I think he's right. And I think I might be ready for that experimental treatment when we get back. The weeks in Kerala unfolded with a gentle rhythm. Aiden began the mornings with physical therapy on the beach, the warm sand and sea air bringing a new dimension to exercises that had been clinical and joyless in Mumbai. Leela appointed herself his official motivator, creating elaborate reward systems involving seashells and stories. Marcus introduced them to local literature and history, arranging for community elders to visit and share oral traditions. Eliza found herself drawn into these sessions, her analytical mind captivated by the layers of meaning in ancient tales. In the evenings, they often gathered on the veranda, the adults talking quietly while Leela slept and Aiden drifted in and out of consciousness, more peaceful than he'd been in years. It was during these twilight conversations that Eliza and Marcus gradually revealed themselves to each other, not as employer and employee, but as two people who had survived devastating loss. I was raised to believe vulnerability was weakness, Eliza admitted one night. My father built his business from nothing, taught me that success required ruthlessness. When I married Rajiv, he thought I was making a mistake, that love would distract me from achievement. And did it? Marcus asked. No. Rajiv understood ambition. He supported mine. But after Aiden was born. She sighed. I kept working the same hours, making the same choices. I told myself it was for his future, that I was setting an example. You were doing what you thought was right. I was hiding, she corrected herself. The boardroom made sense to me. Motherhood didn't. I could quantify success in business. With Aiden, I always felt I was failing some invisible standard. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When Leela was born, I was terrified. I'd spent my life in books, in theory. Suddenly this tiny human needed me to be practical, decisive. Priya was the natural parent, patient, intuitive. I was the one who panicked when Leela had a fever. What changed? Necessity, he said simply. After Priya died, I had no choice but to become what Leela needed. I made countless mistakes. Still do. But I learned that parenting isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Eliza looked over at her sleeping son. I've missed so much of his life, focused on providing rather than being present. And now? Now you're here, Marcus said gently. That's what matters. Later that night, reviewing the day in her journal, Eliza realized something startling: she hadn't checked her work emails in over a week. More surprisingly, she didn't feel anxious about it. Something fundamental was shifting in her understanding of what constituted a well-lived life. The transformation in Aiden became more evident each day. The sea air seemed to awaken something in him, a willingness to try, to engage, to imagine.